Let me give you an idea of what's involved. Her Majesty's Naval Base Devonport and the Dockyard is the largest naval base in Western Europe and an irreplaceable strategic asset for Plymouth and for the UK. You can fit Nelson's column inside the frigate repair sheds at Devonport. It is home to the amphibious fleet, hydrographic vessels, half the Type 23 frigates and the future home to Type 26s, in addition to being the operational training hub of the frontline fleet through FOST and the Royal Navy's Amphibious Centre of Excellence at RM Tamar. It has the only facility in the UK authorised and licensed to carry out deep maintenance on Royal Navy submarines. A 2015 economic impact assessment of the naval base and dockyard showed that in total, Babcock spends £51.4 million annually with 369 suppliers. And of this, 41.5 million with 269 suppliers originated from Her Majesty's Naval Base, Devonport. 1/3 of whom would find it difficult to replace the business if their contract with Babcock were to fail. Only 8% of people surveyed believed that they would be able to find other markets immediately with no impact on their business. Productivity is significantly above industry and citywide average at just over 62,500 GVA per FTE compared to approximately 45,200 for Plymouth as a whole. Beyond the walls of the dockyard and the naval base, there's a flourishing defence ecosystem hosting a wide variety of companies like Thales, M-Subs, BMT, Collins Aerospace, Babcock and Barden, just to name a few. Both the marine and manufacturing industries account for 21% of the city's marine manufacturing industry. And Plymouth accounts for 9.2% of England's entire marine industry, and marine manufacturing generates 400.6 million in GVA. The city also hosts the UK's first marine enterprise zone at Ocean's Gate and Marine Business Technology Centre with a smart sound testing range, which we prefer to call our proving ground. Phase 1 and 2 of Ocean's Gate will create 367 jobs. Phase 3, a further 600 jobs. And whilst not officially designated, Plymouth is the UK Centre for Marine Autonomy, the world-class test facility for autonomous solutions and alternative propulsion technology, and a number of prime and SME businesses with established operations in Plymouth, developing the latest marine autonomous systems. This is a real opportunity for the city, and we would want to see Plymouth officially designated as a national centre, the national centre of excellence for marine autonomous systems. Supporting this innovative private sector is a well-established supply chain spanning the manufacturers to the small-scale suppliers. Plymouth boasts the largest concentration of manufacturing south of the Midlands, and it's in the whole of the south of England, south of the Midlands, and is home to manufacturing and engineering giants such as Kawasaki, Hypex and Plessey. In fact, 12% of Plymouth jobs are in the manufacturing industry, compared with 8.3% nationally. Now, both within these companies and outside, the city is a hub for defence innovation, supported by a collaborative environment made possible through organisations such as the FAST, that's Future Autonomy at Sea cluster, and cross-sector projects such as Smart Sound Plymouth, Coast Laboratory and Cyber Ship.
Okay.
I've got one more thing to say before I close, I promise. Plymouth also sits as an anchor point in a wider Southwest defence ecosystem. Recent mapping of the heart of the Southwest LEP defence industry showed the scale of the defence sector across Devon and Somerset, estimating its value at £2.6 billion, with its innovative capability being recognised by DASA, and as they look to launch their Southwest Regional Defence Cluster and reverse the historically low levels of successful DASA grants in the area. Thank you.
Thank you for that very in-depth and a very insightful overview of Plymouth. So that's brilliant. It's given us a good rounded discussion to move on from. But could you, obviously you spoke about 685 million GVA. Could you relatively briefly explain how you've managed with past fluctuations and what measures your contingency preparations you're making for the integrated review?
Sure. Well, I've got a number of historical examples which I'd be happy to supply you with in writing afterwards if you're short of time. I mean, bear in mind that Plymouth in 1985, when agency management of the document came in, lost some 16,000 jobs, virtually within 18 months. And it took us 12 years to recover from that position. And so we've been on an odyssey of diversification in terms of our economy since then, as you'd imagine. We've been working very hard on that. We looked at every time there's a flag flown or a kite flown about potential reductions in the dockyard. Of course, we're always alert to that and working on our case for retention of services because it is so important. Just giving you an example, I mean, there was talk a little while ago of Bulwark and Albion going. Now, those two projects there, those two ships, that would put 1,176 jobs at risk. It would remove £61 million GVA from the Devon and Cornwall economy. So we're always alert to these kind of things in making our case. So, you know, we're working on our future now. And we're working, that Oceanscape project is a 35-hectare site, southern edge of the Devonport dockyard. And that is where our future lies, in part. The projects around Smart Sound. You know, we've got 350 square miles of ocean around Plymouth Sound, so it's a really good place to be doing that kind of thing. As I say, we've got specialisms emerging all over the place in a number of sectors, from culture and creativity to visitor economy and so on. We're just about to open in about 10 days, only £45 million project called The Box, which is the biggest cultural opening in the UK this year, probably for the next 5 years.
Okay.
By the way, the heart of that will include a magnificent display of Royal Naval figureheads, which are flying from the ceiling.
Well, thank you for that, and please do send those additional information and case studies into as we build up the information on this. I'd like to turn to Mr. Fanu and Mr. Hurst. You're based in Plymouth, and I just want to understand, you provide to the defence industry. Was that a simple decision just to say we're going to put ourselves in Plymouth right by where our customer was, or was there any other circumstances in your rationale to thinking why to set up there?
Brett, do you want to answer first?
Sure. I guess for me it was a little bit different than Nick. I'm obviously from the States. My U.S. company had contracted with a local business that was sort of on again, off again for the development of a small manned submersible that we used with NAVSEA to develop requirements for large unmanned underwater vehicle systems. And we found the location, the facilities, the availability of science parks and real estate to build a bespoke factory, the number of qualified people from the local university, good engineers, great engineers actually, retired military personnel, and the presence of the military in general, and as well as fantastic natural resources, a wonderful harbor and sound in which we could operate almost year round, to be compelling. And so we continue to invest to stand the company up properly as an ongoing limited corporation, and just grown and grown from a small garage and 5 people to just about 65 people now. So we're still small, but on this side, it just organically happened, and it doesn't hurt that it's a fantastic place to live either.
There we go. And Mr. Hurst, thank you.
Yeah, from our point of view, we initially moved to Plymouth in 1994 to take advantage of the incentives that are being offered to locate to the science park at Langage. We have just recently signed a new 15-year lease, reinforcing our long-term commitment to maintain our position in Plymouth for a few reasons. The main reasons would be obviously the relative proximity to MOD Abbey Wood and Army HQ, the potential to collaborate with the abundance of defence-based companies in the region, the ability to expand our foothold at relatively low cost to elsewhere in the country, obviously the local support of local MPs and other trade organisations and the LEP, and very importantly these days down here in the southwest, the work-life balance we can offer our employees is perhaps more attractive than elsewhere in the country, and this is obviously becoming an increasingly important factor these days post-COVID, when people are looking for a new role or a new job.
Thank you. Chair?
Stuart, thank you very much indeed. And it's good to hear such a strength of support for the city of Plymouth. Martin, did you have a follow-up question on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Evans, as a former councillor myself, I'm very much aware of some of the challenges that local authorities, the length and breadth of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland face in times. You mentioned, first of all, autonomous systems. I'm wondering how engaged you feel your business options there in terms of regeneration and development are, and taking the issue of diversification. You forgive me for asking, but would you welcome the placement of the nuclear deterrent in Plymouth and your submarine-based opportunities?
You're on mute, I think, Councillor.
By deterrent, do you mean the missiles?
If you were asked by the MOD to take on board the nuclear deterrent and through the submarine, which are at the moment based in Faslane in Scotland, would you see that as an opportunity for diversification, and would you welcome it?
Well, I think the question is the capacity there in the dockyard at the moment, because as you know, we're about to embark on a £1 billion construction project to enable the dockyard to maintain its existing work on maintaining the deterrent, and so it is that project is about to kick off. You have sort of thrown me there a little bit. I didn't realise that the deterrent itself and the weapons were on the move. But
well, they're not at the moment. But to take my word for it, I'd like them to be. But
well, in which case,
perhaps a bit of clarity for the committee, if you were given the opportunity.
No, I think at the moment, if I could say, our priorities are. We have got at the moment 13 redundant submarines in Devonport, in number 5 basin, that have been sitting there since they were decommissioned. We've been trying to get the MOD to actually sort that out, because it's taken up valuable space inside the yard, which could be used for a more diverse range of opportunities for the surface fleet. And so if we were to be prioritising anything on the submarine front at this moment in time, it would be to get subs out rather than bring the deterrent in. I think that would be the priority at the moment.
So that would be a no to hosting the nuclear deterrent.
Yeah, I think we should just make it clear that there are no intended plans to move the nuclear deterrent from Faslane for the moment, but we can understand why the question is posed. Richard, you had a quick follow-up on that?
Yes, Councillor Evans, just quickly, I don't know if you're a nautical man, but these nuclear deterrent submarines are huge and draw more than aircraft carriers. In Portland, where my constituency, we couldn't get them in. Would you have the depth of water were this awful scenario to ever happen, which it won't, to take these submarines?
Yes, indeed. We're a little down the track now in terms of on that basis. Yes, the Plymouth Sound's got one of the deepest natural harbors in the UK, in the world actually, in the world. And so yes, the draft is fine. We've got a bit of problem with the giant aircraft carriers actually. They have we can still get one of those in once or twice a year, but we can't, but the submarines is fine.
Okay, so if I can just pull us out of this very interesting political rabbit hole about where to put the nation's nuclear deterrent, we would agree, though, and any of us who have visited Devonport will be aware that there is a graveyard of older submarines that need to be decommissioned, and that is well overdue. And I think you've articulated that point now. I don't think there's any need to return to that point. Moving forward, Kevin, can we turn to prosperity, please?
Yeah. The government, it's now 2 years ago, produced a prosperity agenda for defence. Very little seems to be been implemented. But from your point of view of a local authority, Councillor Evans, in terms of ensuring that contracts, when they are let, take into account local prosperity, how do you think that should be weighted and done?
Well, I think what we're saying is that there's a massive opportunity here to, if I could respond respond positively to the levelling up agenda. If things continue as they are, which is that there's not much weight at all given to social value and skills and prosperity retention locally, but if they were, even if it were 5 to 10%, then we think that would have a massive opportunity to deploy those MOD budgets to even more benefit to our locality. If you look at just up the road from us at Hinckley in Somerset with a construction project there, there's some really good practice there about how the deployment of that enormous sum of money can have a fantastic effect on the local economy. So, all we're asking, I suppose, is for an introduction of that kind of modelling, that kind of matrix to be deployed in the spending and the awarding of MOD contracts.
Very happy with that. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Richard, turning to local authorities.
Councillor Evans, what could the MOD do better when engaging local authorities?
So, as a council, we're used to working in partnership. We have to. With health and social care, for example, we work hand in glove with the hospital, with social care providers and primary care to ensure high quality services for our residents, whilst at the same time maximising economies of scale and driving efficiencies. The MOD is woven into the fabric of our city. The armed forces have provided jobs for thousands of Plymouthians down the years. But Plymouth also offered thousands of military personnel and their families a home for generations too. Attendance at our Armed Forces Day celebrations every year sees 50,000 people attending on Plymouth Hoe.
Councillor Evans, forgive me, can I just interrupt? Sorry, I do apologise. Can I just gently remind you of the question, what could the MOD do better when engaging with you? The MOD, what could it do better? Obviously, it's doing a very good job, and you're eulogising quite rightly about your lovely city, but what could the MOD do better?
Yeah, sure. I was on a Zoom the night before last with the local hospital about how they're going to deploy their £600 million of government money and how we can work together for the betterment of the city. I mean, we don't have those conversations with the MOD when there's money to be spent. I mean, if you look at that £1 billion project in the yard at the moment, for example, I mean, don't get me wrong, £1 billion of spending and 1,000 jobs is fantastic. And I'm not sniffing at that. What I am saying is we could make that even better if we had a bit more of a discussion around, for example, getting people upskilled in advance of that kind of activity, having this timescales shared with us so that we can prepare people for that. We do it for bulges in other inward investment projects. Why not this course, we've got the opportunity. There is a public sector land board in Plymouth. We'd love the DOI to come in from the cold and join us in this celebration. We work well with one public estate. We've just started a new project outside Plymouth railway station, Brunel Plaza, where OPE have been magnificent in their help. So we can work with government. We do work with government. We ask it strongly, please. We hear announcements about the Royal Citadel may be sold. No discussions with the council. We hear about Stonehouse Royal Barracks being the home of the Royal Marines for 350 years, may be sold. No conversations with the council about the future of that, and even though the council has huge impact on us.
Are you, sorry to interrupt you again, in which case, if you're getting nothing from them, are you pushing them? Are you sending delegations or speaking to your MPs and doing all the things you can do to get the MOD to listen to you and hopefully to work better with you?
Sure. We have 3 MPs covering Plymouth. Gary Streeter, Sir Gary Streeter, Johnny Mercer, who of course is a Defence Minister now, and Luke Pollard, who's the Shadow Environment Secretary. And we regularly brief them on what we call Plymouth offers and asks. So it isn't just us with the begging bowl. It is us saying if the government would give us this, we can deliver that, the UK PLC. So all that we ask is that the MOD works more proactively with the council to ensure that the opportunities and risks associated with future land and building disposals in Plymouth, or the increases of other defence assets by rebranded personnel in the Plymouth Travel to Work area, are fully consulted upon with the council. That's as simple as I can put the ask.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask our other 2 panellists, Brett and Nick, just to speak about why Plymouth is a place to invest globally? Is there brand awareness that makes Plymouth attractive in the same way that Detroit is attractive from the car industry perspective? Have we reached that point where there is a international brand recognition for Plymouth, or is that something that the MOD needs to work more closely with Plymouth? Brett, do you want to go first?
I guess my perception will be limited to how it's perceived in the United States and my work with the Defense Department there. I think it's just bluntly often confused with Portsmouth, and we could do more. Just bluntly, it is. And I've had many people turn up in the wrong city waiting for a meeting. I wish I were kidding. I think we could do a lot more to raise our international profile, particularly with the United States military, given that we have a now longstanding defense cooperation treaty that puts to rest a lot of ITAR issues that would have otherwise prevented sort of cooperation. There's a lot more we could do, I think, at high levels in the MOD and even base to base, commander to commander, unit to unit. My specific area within Five Eyes, there's very close organization and cooperation, but it's mostly centered around London and Poole. People don't generally know, although now that we have quite a lot of visitors from the States coming to see the products we make that we export there, they've become aware of how impressive Plymouth is, both in terms of the skills that exist here and the ability to build some things that no one else can on price and on budget, which is critically important. Much more cost effective to work here than in the States, to be honest. Yeah, it's coming up, but we could do a lot more. And I think that the resources at Devonport are not deployed to their fullest effect to give people an understanding on the other side of the pond what they could really do if they put their mind to it here.
All right, that's really interesting to hear. The Southwest as a whole in the UK does punch above its weight when it comes to MOD procurement. I should mention that if people are mixing up Portsmouth and Plymouth, it's probably better to mix up those 2 cities than Plymouth, UK, and Plymouth, Massachusetts, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nick, do you have any views?
Yeah, I do. I do think it strikes me that R&D investment by the MOD in projects seems to stop at Bristol, and the Southwest is quite often ignored and not given the sort of funding that seems to be available to the M4 corridor and to other parts of the UK. And as Brett was saying, I think that Plymouth has a lot to offer. There's an abundance of defence companies down here with some clever people. And I think that the MOD itself needs to perhaps partition its strategy a little bit so that it doesn't always favour the larger enterprises and considers the smaller enterprises, where we can often react quickly to situations and we tend to be much more innovative. I do think that a certain amount of the R&D spend, or more of the R&D spend, could be targeted to the southwest, and particularly Plymouth.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. John, would you like to take us on to looking at the shipyards?
Yes. We talked about about the various opportunities, and one of the interesting ones, although I know it's across in Cornwall, but enormously important to yourselves, is the takeover and hopefully the reopening of the Appledore shipyard. What opportunities do you see arising from that? Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, obviously I don't like commenting on what's happening in the local authority area, but if I could, I would involved right at the beginning with colleagues from the GMB union, amongst others, in trying to save Appledore shipyard. So the recent acquisition by Allen and Wolff is music to my ears. I think any move to boost UK shipbuilding is welcome for jobs in this area and in the surrounding community up there. I think it's great news for Devon and the wider marine sector. The key thing now, though, if you don't mind me saying, I'm the temerity to say this, is that if levelling up's to work, we need to make sure that work that is currently intended to go abroad actually doesn't go abroad, but actually is used to back UK shipbuilding. There are skills here, there's talent here, there's steel here, there's passion here, and we should be using our UK tax pounds to shore up these yards and to give them a brighter future.
So will the local authorities in Devon and Cornwall and the members of Parliament be lobbying hard for the Fleet Solid Support ship contracts to be coming to the UK, most likely on a modular building basis, with the advantages for a number of areas?
We've been campaigning for that. For Devonport itself, the FSS doesn't of itself provide thousands of jobs, but design jobs, good, well-paid jobs, above the Plymouth average jobs, would be very welcome indeed. But really surprised that the FSS wasn't classified as warships and therefore could have been already finding its way to UK yacht. We find it really puzzling, and we'd be very happy to see those FSSs done here. I mean, if you think about the Type 31s, we reckon that'll bring 100 design jobs into Babcock's in Plymouth. I'd be happy with that. But according to the Confederation Shipbuilding and Engineering Unions, there'd be a direct tax and national insurance return to the Treasury of £215 million. That's 20% of the contract cost. Now, if that was to be applied to the UK yards rather than sent abroad, that 20% would be lost forever. Whereas here, it could be recycled and repurposed. And with the post-COVID environment at the moment, and dare I mention it, the post-Brexit environment, we need every pound we can get and every job we can get.
Okay, thank you. That leads.
Can I just say your puzzlement over the current position on the FSS is shared by members of this committee.
Okay, you touched on the international markets. That leads us nicely to Kevin's next question. Sorry, Derek's next question.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask you what your perception or views are about the international defence markets in terms of whether or not it's a level playing field and how fair it is? Maybe starting off with Brett and Nick.
Yeah, in general, no, I don't think it's terribly fair, but as a business, we're lucky enough to have some specific qualifications and capabilities which allow us to access the international defence market without too much difficulty, as we operate in a niche with what we do. But I am aware it's difficult for others. We've also found that traditionally difficult markets such as the US are difficult to break into, but we've been more successful because of our technology and know-how, and they're generally more welcoming to us. That said, as a component supplying SME, we're often frustrated by the market's tendency to sort of bias decisions towards the larger enterprises, as I mentioned earlier. And as such, we're often stifled in our ability to be able to offer solutions which we know provide a good technical advantage and not only offer real value for money, but in many instances, were we to be engaged at an early stage, probably provide substantial savings. So, yeah, I think also the government sometimes when it's looking at building making large platform acquisitions, they don't always look to insist on strong protocols regarding onshore supply, meaning that UK PLC can sometimes lose out with these things. Right, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
I guess the international market, I wouldn't say it's necessarily fair. I guess it's quite variegated. So, for example, we've been working on a couple of proposals over the past few months for India. And often what we see is that the RFPs that come out are nothing more than fishing for intellectual property and to help them develop their internal sort of RFP that will only be distributed to Indian countries. And they have a huge component for internal content. We see the same thing with Australia, although they're much more welcoming and they very much like having US and UK companies sort of part of Five Eyes, startup subsidiaries or team with Australian companies. Working in the US, it's an odd one. You know, they are much more focused on buying domestic for their military product. We should be as well here, but I think the government here often ignores the fact that we have a pretty significant defense trade cooperation treaty that is pretty much overlooked, and we don't push it. It breaks down a lot of the barriers to market entrance in the U.S., particularly around ITAR. But then there are some significant advantages also to being in the UK, one of which is that our ITAR restrictions are different. And so I can sell to a larger swath of the world the things I design and build here that I sell to the United States, but for which I maintain the intellectual property in the United Kingdom, intentionally so. So it's a mixed bag. I think we could do more to promote domestic production and export. And certainly it's going to get more and more expensive the longer we ignore doing that. The skills go away. The yards go away. So it's good to see Appledore coming back just because it's sort of turning the tide. But whether the markets are fair or not, I think the biggest issue is really whether or not we are competitive and innovative. If we're innovative and we have a product people want to buy, fair doesn't have a whole lot to do with it when we're selling to our allies in particular. So I would say we need to focus more on funding small businesses. If we want to forget about fairness and be competitive, more contracts to small businesses. They're much quicker, they're much more innovative. And we need to drive down the cost of all the shipbuilding and innovation. So much goes through the large primes in the US and in the UK that it's very, very difficult. In fact, it's harder for a small business to work and comply with large prime processes and requirements than it is to comply with government requirements often.
So how would you suggest that small businesses or government changes in terms of including and having many more small businesses involved?
Well, the government tends to set up clusters or committees or programs like Progeny, but they tend to be administered by the large primes themselves that compete for the business. That's problematic on its face.
Yes.
So we could stop doing that. Could make it easier to access List X material for companies that qualify. That's a difficult process, and it's something that you tend to have to be sponsored for in part by a large prime, which is a barrier to entry. And as of late in the last decade, I've seen an alarming trend to run almost everything through large primes for no other reason than they have a contract already. And it's much easier, and this is direct quotes many times, or I'm paraphrasing, much easier to do that than try to set up another contract. Perfect example, we're about to be awarded a contract this week, or so they say, that the end user wanted and has been pursuing for 2 years. Not the product, not the R&D, just the contract being put in place. And so there's a real problem with sort of a malaise in the service where they say, well, we'll just go with the vendor that's already got the contract. that doubles the price right out of the gate for something I could sell, sometimes triples, quadruples. On one contract I'm working now with the US, we are delivering 95% and we are 25% of the cost. Everything else is burden admin sitting on top, managing us. There are more people managing the output of my company than in my entire company. And that's not as bad in the UK. It's quite bad in the US, but it still exists here. So it's very difficult, and little companies, small companies that don't really know it inside out like we do, find it labyrinthine to sort of navigate. And there's so many clusters, so many committees, so many meetings, so many programs. They all end up being driven through the large primes. You need small business set-asides.
Just, if I can just interrupt there as well, in answer to your question as well about what the government could do. One of the frustrations we have is UK-funded technology, defence-funded technology, trying to sell that overseas to allies. Frustratingly difficult. There are many obstacles put in our way to prevent us talking to allies about some of the technology we've developed for the UK that we could sell and would be great for UK PLC. And we've got two examples of that we've worked on in the last 7 years that we have developed. It's on assets in the UK now. And we were told at the very beginning that there would be an export, the MOD would sponsor us to take this out and export it to allies, certainly across the world. And we've found that has not happened. It's been very frustrating. And you get very little feedback from the MOD when you ask for some help in that regard.
Okay. Yeah, I think, and more on that topic, we actually have I just looked it up to get the right name. Most of that goes away if you push on the UK-US Defense Trade Cooperation Treaty, which most people don't know exists, and the things that it makes easier. Even us, we're selling, funded by a US end user for a product that's only built here in the UK by this company. And we still had to put State Department technical assistance agreements in place that take months and months to manage and are quite difficult to continue to manage, because every single component that you might want to trade or support has to be on the treaty listed with a price. Totally unnecessary, because nobody looks at the treaty at all. And even the Defense Department doesn't, on both sides, have no idea the thing even exists. I mean, that's one way we could fix that. But the other way would be, I think we just need to focus a little more on small business and understand that they are the hub of innovation. With a little bit of forethought, maybe aligning with our Navy X, with the US Navy X, aligning their DARPA with our ARPA that's about to start. There's huge areas of technological expertise and export from small businesses here in the UK that could really advantage a place like Plymouth and my company, Nick's company, and many, many others, even the large companies. But there just doesn't seem to be a coherent approach to pushing UK product into the US, but there should be. I mean, the US has a huge foreign cooperative trade office that loves working with the UK. They have a decades-long established joint coalition warfare program office that favorite place to work with is the UK, but they have very little engagement from the UK side that we can see to take advantage of these many billion-dollar programs.
Okay. And there's I keep banging the drum, but I mean, SMEs are the lifeblood of the UK economy, according to Boris, and yet we get very little support, particularly from the MOD, but from government in general, in terms of being able to exploit some of these opportunities that exist for us worldwide.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just turn this around? You speak about the importance of being able to sell completed products across the world and what more we can do with that. Switching it over, what work is done to promote Appledore as a capability to build small ships? You look at your inventory, what's been built there. It's now, I think Holland Wolff is now, or Infrastructure has now taken over their operation. There's a new lease of life, a new opportunity there. What is the strategy to go to NATO allies, for example, and say, we can build your ships, we can compete with your own businesses to produce small vessels, because that's what we do well?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be about price. Everybody, it's like buying cars. Everybody looks for the most they can get for their money.
But do you need government assistance to make that happen, or is this we should just leave it to
I think a lot of process can be streamlined. I think the government assistance could be more directly connecting the various yards and various businesses with the opportunities, and not routing it through the large primes. There are some opportunities here in Plymouth with the with the various schemes that are going on, but it's a tough one because you're competing against yards, India, China, that state yards running as companies, and they'll discount it just to have the throughput. So I think we have to focus on our allies and convince our allies as well as ourselves not to buy from somebody else. Let's buy from each other. Let's maintain high standards, and let's figure out how we can reduce the burden of interacting with one another across the pond and elsewhere.
Okay, well, I'm just slightly conscious of time. That leads us nicely just to look at the wider picture of the defence industrial strategy. Richard, do you want to take us forward on that?
Yes, this question to you all, really, and I think in part you've actually answered, Mr. Phaneuf, quite a lot of this question, but if you could just, all three of you, give perhaps some pithy points in answer to this question. What would you like to see from a new defence industrial strategy? Mr. Phaneuf, do you want to start?
That's a big one. I think we have to stop paying lip service to the idea that we're doing commercial off-the-shelf component integration.
Is there a minute pause while we change over?
We have to focus on it. We often think about, well, how do we commercialize defense technology? But the way it works now, that's completely backwards. To be thinking about how we streamline the procurement, the acquisition process, the contracting process, and we incorporate more commercial technology with less burdensome sort of regulations that prevent it. So we think about buying things on 10, 20, 30, 50-year scales. But the technology, by the time we procure it after 2 years of arguing about the procurement, the technology you're procuring is largely obsolete. So we need to see a really commercially focused procurement strategy, particularly at the outset of any R&D project, looking at what we want a future capability to be and not constraining our companies to select from a highly technologically limited and format and a contracting vehicle system that simply doesn't work for innovation. So we need a much more agile acquisition force, particularly at the front end for R&D. That's my opinion.
Mr. Hurst?
Yeah, I think I very much agree with what Brett had to say there. What I would add to that, though, is I do think that the MOD seems, and I feel a little sorry for the MOD in this respect, seems incapable of looking much more than sort of 18 months ahead at any one time. Babcock have just published a 50-year plan for what they want to do down in Plymouth. But the MOD don't seem to be able to look much further than, as I say, 18 months. And I think part of the reason for that is that, we have, every time there's a cabinet reshuffle, there's a new Secretary of State for Defence who has different priorities from the previous Secretary of State of Defence. And then there's pressure from the Treasury. And so it's a moving feast. It's like a wobbly jelly. They can't actually hold it in place for very long before things are changing. And I do think that the way government runs these large departments needs to be looked at. I think it's quite an old-fashioned way of doing it. And I think if you look at countries around the world, in the US and elsewhere, they have permanent secretaries of state or equivalents thereof who remain in post for a decade or more. And you find that there is a much more solid strategy and plan, and procurement is more straightforward.
And all this, all the points you've raised, of course, affects your long-term planning, which I think you're hinting very strongly at, Mr. Phaneuf.
Yes, very much so.
Well, Mr. Hurst, perhaps you could answer that quickly.
Well, we as I said to you earlier, we have developed some technology that we could sell at the moment. We're unable to sell, but equally, by the same token, we actually spent about £60,000 developing some technology for a platform that is being offered at the moment. The decision should have been made on that in 2015 when we did the work, and every year it has been pushed out another year and another year. I'm referring to Warrior, I don't know if you're familiar with that, and here we are in 2020, 5 years later, we're £60,000 worse off for our troubles, and still no sign of that actually going ahead.
Could I echo the call for a little longer termism? It's really important for business, for the small and medium enterprises that perhaps have got a riskier life cycle than most, and a bit of stability, something I think that the City Council would be calling for, if we could have a longer term plan. I mean, I know 50 years is quite difficult politically, but 50 months sometimes seems something that is out of reach. Could I just give a couple of points of feedback from some business in Plymouth about what they would want from a new defence industrial strategy?
Very briefly, if you can.
We've got a problem in terms of uptake of Innovate UK money, in Plymouth anyway. And we'd really like to find out why that is. We think it's because the grants do not marry up well with the needs of business. And I think that's something that you might like to have a bit of a look at. The other thing is that with marine having been identified as a high value proposition for our area for exports, it is disappointing that with our high concentration of defence businesses, there's no dedicated defence specialist operating in our area. So if you think there's this is another bit of, can we join it all up? Bits are in place, but they need to be made more of a coherent whole. And I think, finally, on productivity, defence industrial productivity in Plymouth is much higher than productivity generally in the city. So any improvements that we can make to defence productivity actually benefits the whole city, and we'd be passionately supporting you in your efforts to help us with that.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. And can I say that the passion in which you've spoken today is very evident indeed. It's been very helpful to give us an insight in a case study as to looking at Plymouth today. Thank you very much indeed to Councillor Tudor Evans, to Brett Freynoff and to Nick Hurst for your time this